Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Uncomfortable but Necessary. Thank you so much for joining me every week here on this podcast to have meaningful conversations that are important to our well being, our overall well being as an individual, as young people, especially in today's generation. So, today we'll be having, a beautiful and interesting one because this is one thing I believe almost everyone, if not presently, but at one point or the other, is experiencing or have experienced or will experience in the future or, in a way. And if this is not happening to you personally, I want you to see it as a way, to kind of ammonate yourself for someone to be that help when the situation arises for someone to give counsel, to give advice. Because one thing I've learned that sometimes we discard some kind of information or some kind of knowledge when we see ourselves not needing them personally, forgetting that we live in a world of community. We have family members, we have cousins, nephew, nieces, people looking up to us, church members, business partners, you know big sis, people seeing you as a big sister, as a big brother. They know that we live in the community of people. So when you come across any information at all or any wisdom that is being shared and you're like, oh, I don't need this right now, and you just want to just swipe before you swipe through, ask yourself, do I have someone in my space right now that is most likely going to need this? Probably you are not even aware, but trust me, there's always someone around you or that you will come your way later in life, or even probably your own children, that this knowledge will be valuable to them. Okay, so having said that, what we'll be having today is like a continuation of what we started off last week, talking about trauma. And today, let me just start with some of the things. I'll just mention some of the things we talked about last week, and I'll just pick it up from there. And if you get to have the fullness of what we discussed last week, you can just probably pause this particular episode and listen to that. Or when you're done listening to this, you can listen to that because it's part two of the part one. Okay, so we're talking about trauma, how it affects individuals, as it affects families. But last week it was just like a foundational stuff that I talked about, how trauma came about, how people try to survive amongst trauma. But today, our subsequent episode, we'll be talking about how it affects individuals. We're talking about how it affects relationships, how it affects choices and decisions later in life, and how it affects the community, the world as a global space. All right, so I need you to know that. Let me just give a simple explanation of what trauma is or what trauma looks like. I said here that trauma is an emotional wound caused by a painful, frightening, overwhelming, or deeply distressing experience. So this is an experience that it's in an experience that is being born from a place of it's a kind of wound that's being born from the place of distress. So this is not a physical wound that, oh, you can see the wound. Sometimes it can even be physical. Sometimes what is traumatic to people, what gives people trauma, it can even be something physical. It could be physical, so it's not only emotional. It could be any kind of wound at all that is caused by a painful, frightening, overwhelming, or deeply distressing experience. Sometimes your trauma can be, what is giving you trauma can even be a child. Probably a child you had, from being raped. That is a physical one. This is what you are saying. Or even a physical wound that that you had on your body. Probably you were maltreated, you were abused as a child, or you were at one point kidnapped and you were maltreated. This is aside it's been an emotional thing, it's something that is even physical, you can see. So it's any wound at all that is caused by a painful, frightening, overwhelming, or deeply distressing experience. Examples are like abuse, neglect, bullying, rejection, divorce, betrayal, loss of a loved one, poverty and hardship, toxic family environments, violence. And I need you to know that even though two people can experience the same events, but it can affect them differently. And I needed to say this because you are most likely going to know someone else that gone through the same trauma you went through. And probably, the way it affected them different from the way it affected you. Sometimes people make us feel like, is too much, why is it not that just small thing that happened 5 years ago? It also happened to this person now and they are living the fine. But you are not living fine. So you need to know that even though two people have the same experience, you know, what they will feel, how it will affect them will be different. Just the same way if two people read the same book at the same time at the same place, when you ask them what did you learn from the book, they are most likely not going to say exactly the same thing. So our experience is peculiar to us individually. Even though you had the same experience, but it's more personal to me than it's personal to you. It's a personal experience, especially trauma is a personal experience. So I needed to say that because some people, try to kind of trivialize what people feel or how people are feeling when they are being traumatized by an experience. And the person going through the trauma is almost asking, is it that I'm not supposed to feel this way? Is it that it's wrong for me to feel this way? Or am I exaggerating? Or am something wrong with me? Or probably I even one of those people that always tell these other people they are too much. So you need to know that probably even though even though you had the experience with them, you had the same experience, and probably you have moved ahead and they're not moving ahead. It is different. It is personal, more personal to them than it is to you. So what happened to you is a personal thing. How it happened to them is a personal thing. We learn, we heal, we move on, differently. So you need to know that. Okay. And I still need to say that because sometimes I've seen people give time to healing. The fact that you healed, from a trauma 6 months does not mean it takes 6 months for everybody to heal. What made you heal was probably because of the kind of community you had, the knowledge you had, your kind of a personality. So a lot of things contribute to how people heal, or the pace at which people heal. The environment contributes a lot. The community speaks a lot. The temperament, the personality of the individual speaks a lot. The present situation that you're in, are you still inside that trauma or you're already out of it? It speaks a lot. Okay, so that means to say that there is no standard time frame for any trauma to heal. It's dependent on different things, like I said, the people, their experience, their community, their peculiarities, their personalities, and all of those things. Okay, and I also want to mention that sometimes we've put trauma in a box, like it has to be some kind of dramatic thing that happened. Oh, that day this happened, fire fell, the brimstone now came, then there was now a voice from the thunder. Sometimes it might not be as dramatic as that, because when people say I'm having trauma and they are sharing their experience, people are like, there's nothing dramatic about this. So why is this person making a big deal out of it? Sometimes it is not about the drama. The fact is that, is this thing a painful wound? Is this thing, like the definition I gave, is it frightening? Does this person find it overwhelming? Is it a deeply distressing experience to them? If it is yes, 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 and yes, then it is a trauma. It doesn't need to have, the glamour, drama, and all of that before we can term it as something traumatic. Because so now I want to say, to mention some of our, ways that trauma comes, because we really know how do people, you know experience trauma. What are some of the situations that can make people be a victim of trauma. Sometimes it could be from the place of constant criticism. Because sometimes trauma comes from constant criticism. And you might be like, what can be traumatic from criticism? So this is now in the season of, we're in the time and age of social media. People criticize openly, publicly. It's not just open, it's not a public place. People criticize you, they feel like they know you, they feel like they can advise you. People that have no business with you, that don't know you, so it can be traumatic for some people when they're constantly criticized, especially when it's not just criticism, when it's not, being done well, when it's almost looking like you're judging me. Because the way some people criticize people, you will think that they have something, they have a personal issue with them. So constant criticism can traumatize someone. When someone is often, traumatized. And I also need you to know, as we are learning these things, we need to also be asking ourselves, are we doing, sometimes when we learn things, we're like, oh, is people, are people doing these things to me? That is the first thing we learn. It should be, am I or have I in any way be like this to someone else? So I need you to ask yourself, how do you criticize people when you need to do it at all? Do you do it in a constructive manner, or you do it in a demeaning way, or you even insult them? You ask them, "Are you sure you are your wife like this? Are you sure?" People can just say things because they want to just feel good. So when you're criticizing people, even you watching me personally, how do you criticize people? How do you tell them something is wrong? Do you do it in a constructive way, in a loving way, or you just say your mind and you just move on, not minding what it does, the damage it does to the person, to the receiver? Another thing that can often cause trauma to people is growing up feeling unloved. We're just checking some of the things that can be traumatic for some people. Some people have, when they were growing up, probably whilst they were children, they did not feel loved. Because it's one thing for you to love me, it's the other thing for me to feel loved. Feeling love is a personal thing. Loving me is a you thing. You think you're loving, but me, am I feeling loved? So some people struggle with being feeling loved, acceptance while growing up. It can be a traumatic experience for them because it's painful, it's an emotional wound for them. And people like that will most likely not do well in some relationship, or probably when they have someone that loves them, they still feel unworthy to be loved. So that is when people now start having some kind of extremes in the way they deal with people, in how they handle their traumas, because sometimes they don't even know where the trauma is coming from. They don't even know what caused the trauma. They don't even know what they're experiencing is trauma. So they don't know how to handle it. They think it's just, a character thing, or it's just my personality. Sometimes it's not just your personality. You're responding to trauma. And another way is, being compared to others. Sometimes I've seen, most of the time, parents do these things. They compare you to your siblings, compare you to your cousins. This is how this person is. Oh, this person is doing this thing now. Oh dear, why are you your mates are, when you want to take a course, your mates are. When you don't have a job, your mates are having jobs. When you're not married, your mates are getting married. When you are married and don't have kids, your mates are, you know, the thing is that, when you're constantly compared, especially by people that should support you, like your parents, your spouse, your friends, it can be a traumatic experience. It can be a traumatic experience. Another way that people often suffer trauma is emotional neglect. Probably as a child, probably from your spouse, you've constantly been experiencing emotional neglect. It can be a traumatic experience for you. Another way is never feeling safe. For example, if you live in a dispensation that experienced war, you always have to be on your toes, sleeping with one eye. You're constantly living in fear. Such a person is going through a traumatic experience. So if someone like that probably travels, even when they now off, you know at the end of the day, probably relocate somewhere else, there's still that thing in them. and people, they might even mistake it for, I'm just being conscious. It is trauma, because for a period of time you've been in a place that you felt unsafe, or it could even be in your family. Probably whenever your dad comes up, everybody have to hide themselves. It's the house is no longer safe for you to be. You're looking for where to go, having an excuse. Oh, what will go and do? Oh, let me go. Anytime they want to send anyone on an errand, is like an escape route, because you just want to leave the house. And that's why sometimes when people probably go to high school, go to college, or have the opportunity to leave home to further their education, most likely they don't even want to come back to the house. Or even when they are on holidays, they prefer to stay there because they are not safe at home. So this is to every parent and parents to be, and everyone, a big sister, a big brother. And you need to really ask, how do you really make people feel safe? Now let's forget our parents and you know how they made us feel. Even you as an individual, your friends, are they safe around you? Because this is how we make people have unnecessary trauma. We traumatize people without knowing. When people are around, when they are talking to you, when they are sharing their bodies with you, are they safe? Do you make people feel safe? Or you make them to be careful with what they say, how they say what they say, because you judge them, because you don't even want to understand them, because you think they are always wrong? How do you make people feel around you? Your friends. Let's start from there. Before you start saying how people make you feel, how do you make other people feel? Do you make them feel loved? Do you show kindness? Do you show concern? Are you sincere with your loyalty? Do you really care about them, or you do not just care? You just say your mind, you just act in any way, in as much as you're not hurt, you don't mind if the other person is hurt. That is not how to do life. So the last one I just mentioned under this is having to go up too fast. It can be a traumatic experience, especially if you're you grew up in a setting that probably one of both parents were not there, probably they were dead or absent, or they were alive but they are not in part of your life, or you grew up in a dysfunctional family, the mother, the father are not together, and you probably needed to start doing, at a very tender age, to start living for yourself, paying your bills, do jobs. It can be a traumatic experience for some people. Even though you are learning to survive, it's like you've switched from the ideal growing and thriving way. You are just living life from the place of survival, because that is all you've always known. That is how you've lived. And sometimes if you're not careful, you will think that is how life should be. You think that is how life should be. That is not the ideal. So we need to learn the ideal and know that, oh, this thing that is happening to me, the way I'm acting, the way this person's acting, the way I'm perceiving the situation, it's most likely going to be from a place of trauma. And I also need you to know that not all trauma comes from what happened to you. Some trauma comes from what should have happened but never did. For example, someone that never felt loved is something that did not happen. Okay. So when people have trauma, it's not just about what happened to them. It could be also from a deficiency or something they've lacked that they should have experienced. Right. For example, not receiving love, not receiving protection, not receiving support. What's happening in Nigeria right now, to those of us that are aware, there are a lot of insecurity going on, kidnapping, terrorism, banditry going on. And people that have, been at one point or the other been kidnapped, or had been in the den of terrorists and have been tortured, do you think those people will, if at all, after coming out from those experiences, do you think that experience will come out of them instantly? Do you think they will just be fine? No. Because what I see sometimes, when the government, if at all, when they intervene, or when these people are being retrieved, they now do some kind of 1 month therapy for them. They put them in another house, or they now provide, they give them food. I think they'll be fine. These are deep things. Because you don't know what it means to be at the mercy of another human. You are in a place that you need permission before you move your body. Things that you will do. Do you know what it means? You're constrained and you think this person will be fine. And that is why my heart goes to, you know, to everyone that suffered this kind of abuse. Because this is not what you signed up for. So you think some people like that, they're not people like that are not just traumatized from what happens to them, as in the terrorists, kidnapping or whatever stuff they have that happen. They're also traumatized by the country. People like that, if they have the opportunity to leave the shores of Nigeria, coming back to Nigeria at any point can be a traumatic experience for them. Or hearing the country Nigeria. I've seen people that, whenever they hear something, it just remind them of something, and they just you can see them shivering, you can see them, because what that thing has done to them. So aside the experience they had, even the environment they do, it's just traumatic to them. And that is to tell you that you should not trivialize people's trauma. The fact that, like I said, the fact that you move ahead faster, or the fact that you went through similar trauma and you're here, even you need to learn, you need to ask yourself, what is happening to you? Hope is not survive, you're just trying to max it and try to you've entered survival mode. Have you really healed? Have you really healed? Well, that is one of the things that most people, do when they've gone through one traumatic experience. What they do is they're just looking for survival. How will I survive in this with this trauma? If you're not properly healed, sometimes you just, because you're trying to survive, you make some decisions, you make some choices that are not healthy for you. Okay, so not to go ahead of myself, so I want us to talk about how trauma affects people emotionally now. They can feel anxious, like I said earlier, they can feel numb, they can feel angry, they can feel insecure, they can struggle with trust. So we are learning these things not just for ourselves, but to also be a better communicator, someone that has emotional intelligence. When you are relating with people, we are not too quick to judge. Sometimes people just say some things carelessly, they act carelessly because they think it's just about them, because they're having a good day, so everybody is having a good day. It's not that way. Because your background was in a kind of way does not mean everyone had your experience. So this is we are having this conversation because we need to, and I observe that our word is losing, the thing on kindness. We are losing it amongst ourselves. And that's why this is important for us to have. And another way it affects people now, mentally, how it affects them. They can overthink everything. When you tell them something, that they are now like, oh, are you sure this thing is true? That they're overthinking simple things. It could be their way of responding to trauma. They are constantly expecting the worst. You're telling them, oh, don't worry, this thing, this is how it works. They're already expecting, are you sure it will work? What if? They're expecting what, because that is what trauma has taught them. They live in fear. They struggle to focus. So how does it affect people physically? They may have difficulty sleeping, like someone that had been, in the camp of kidnappers or terrorists for a while. They can have difficulty in sleeping, or they'll be having nightmares. They're constantly tired. They experience headache. They can feel tense most of the time. So these are some of the things that people that experience trauma, go through. So how does trauma affect our relationships? Because we are relational beings, what we go through, who we are, affect our relations in no matter how much we try to hide it. And when I say relationship, it's not just about romantic relationships. This is about our family, with people in our community. Because I can see people, you can know when you're. Sometimes I've seen people, I've lived with people, as neighbors, and I'm like, oh, the way this person is acting is strange. You just say, ah, this person is acting strangely. It could be them responding to trauma. Okay, so like I said, how does it affect relationship, from friendship relationship to housemate relationship to cosmate relationships to church member relationships to romantic relationship or marriage relationship? How does trauma affect people? So, for example, trust issues, fear of abandonment, pushing people away, becoming overly attached, struggling to communicate. So, sometimes people are not reacting to the person in front of them, they are reacting to pain from the past. Sometimes when people are attacking you, probably, you said something and the person is just taking it out of proportion, you need to like take a pause and ask this person gently, why are we still on this same matter, or are you thinking something else? Because this is how we learn emotional intelligence. This is how we can better relate to ourselves. Or else people, everybody will just be doing fire for fire. And at the end of the day, you will have lost someone you could have helped. You will have lost probably a good friend. You will have lost someone that could be a future partner. But because we are not so kind of, we have lost our touch as humans. We don't even want to care, and everybody's, we're all going through one thing. That is true. It is true that we are all going through one thing or the other, but at the same time we also need to help one another. That's actually how the world can get better. Because you as a person, every one of us, we pray for helpers. Ask yourself, are you praying to be a helper to someone? As the same way you're praying to be, to for helpers, the same way someone's prayer is also dependent on you. And sometimes we don't get to choose how we help people, or how God wants us to help them, especially when these people are around you. They're around you for a reason. So sometimes we want people to come to our aid, people to, at times we will call one people, 100 people will come for us. When people to also need help, are you one of the 100 that should come for them? So it is important for us not to just say, oh, he has a problem, they work it out. As much as you can. You don't need to go over and beyond of what you can help. But with the resource you have, with the knowledge you have, with the exposure you have, with this knowledge you are sharing, some of them are not even aware that what is going through them, what's happening to them is trauma. This is how you can help them. So you see people acting in a way, probably you have a disagreement with someone, and you just know that this person is not reacting to the present issue. Sometimes it could be from probably their stress, that one is there, but you can know that they're responding to you as if they're responding to their ex, or they're responding to someone that hurt them in the past. You can know, and this is when you now back off and calm down. Because an unhealed wound can make a safe person feel dangerous. An unhealed wound can make a safe person feel dangerous. Even though you are safe, you're not trying to harm them, you're not trying to hurt them, but because their wound is still an open one, they feel intimidated. They feel like you're scarring them once again. So lastly, I would just want to I'll just take two more. I'll take how trauma can create survivor habits. Because many behavior people call personality traits are actually survival mechanism. Let me say some of them to you. People pleasing. There's some people they call people pleasers. For example, phlegmatics. They're like people pleasers. They're just okay with everything. They don't want to argue. They don't want to fight. They are the people Bible calls blessed are the peacemakers. Sometimes it's not just a temperament or a personality thing. Sometimes it could be from a place of trauma. So that is why you need to really ask yourself the things I do, how when I really act this way, is it my personality? Is it a character thing? Or am I responding to something? Another thing is overachieving. People that just want to be achieving to achieving. Sometimes it's not because they like success that much. It's because they are in a place that they just want to just be proving to people. Probably they grew up from, a toxic, childhood experience. They had a toxic childhood experience, and they just want to just prove to them that, oh, you think I'll not make it? Oh, I will show you that I can make it. So even the success, they're not even enjoying the success. They are not even present with the success. They're not seeing the success. They're seeing it as a weapon to prove to the enemy. And that's why you see a lot of people that are successful, but they are not happy. They're successful and they are not, they are, they don't, they are, you're like, if they're not owning the success. So when you are seeing those signs and you're like, oh, you know that this is not a normal thing. Another thing is people that constantly avoid conflict. Oh, I don't just like to fight. Why? Even though I don't support violence, but sometimes people just intentionally avoid disagreements. When just, I'm not even saying conflict now, just ordinary disagreements, they want to avoid it. They don't want anybody to see them as the bad person. They want to agree with everybody. Sometimes it's from a place of trauma. Probably as a child you were always shut down. What do you know? What do you want to say? Shut up. Or you grew up in such a toxic environment that your opinion did not count, your opinion did not matter. Who the hell are you to say something? You to have opinion. Who dash monkey banana? Especially if you grew up in somewhere like Africa, Nigeria to be precise, we have a lot of slangs and things we say. Who touch monkey banana? Who do you think you are? You two, you are talking. We have this sarcastic way that is almost built into the system, and we think this is how we should communicate to ourselves. And sometimes you're not minding how it affects this other person. You think you just say something, and it's a careless talk. And people, can overthink some things you say, and that word can stay with them for a decade, can stay with them as even as adults. I've seen the adults, saying, "Oh, when I was a child, and I'm like, for you to know that we do is trauma is not what you just grow out of that because as you're, getting old in age, as you're aging, as you're getting old, it will just fizzle out. No, if nothing is done to your trauma, it can be there for a lifetime. Because I've seen people in their 60s, in their 70s, talking about a traumatic experience they had in their childhood, and it's still affecting them in the way they perceive themselves. It's still affecting them with the way they show up. Because sometimes you say, tell people, show up, no, don't procrastinate, go for that thing, you can do it. And you don't know that people are not doing, they can't do it because they are experiencing trauma. Because there's just this feeling of being little that has been said to them over and over, and it has almost become a reality in them. So another thing is always needing control, never asking for help. So there are people that there's people I know, they find it difficult to ask for help. Such people, they probably grew up, they were probably some of those people that we mentioned earlier, that they grew up too fast. Probably they grew up in a dysfunctional family, and probably they were left alone. There was no uncle to help, there was no auntie to help, there was no father that was there. They had the absent parents. So these people, you know, actually fended for themselves. They grew up by themselves. No one was there to help them. So now that they are grown, they're like, if I was little, that was more vulnerable, and I still maneuvered my way, isn't now that I'm an adult, I don't need anybody to help me. Or when people say things that I'm an independent person, sometimes you really need to watch it. Is it from a place of lack of help that made an independent person? I need anybody to help me. And people can take it into their marriage, they can take it into something that's supposed to be a partnership relationship, or you're doing business with someone and you are, finding it difficult to ask a partner in business for help, or you are finding it difficult to delegate because you just want to do everything by yourself. You want to be in control of outcomes sometimes, because a lot of things that sabotage um, people's um, people's work. Some of these things are born from trauma. So let me just end with this. Is this who you really are? Or is this who you had to become to survive? This will be ending today's episode. So whatever it is that is going on with you, whatever it is that you're experiencing right now, what you are probably, you've been seeing as this is my personality, or this is my habit, this is my plan, this is how I do my thing. You really need to ask yourself, is this something that was born from survival? Are you living that way because you need to survive? Like I often tell people, especially people that are from Nigeria, in fact, everybody has been traumatized at one point or the other. Accept it or you don't accept it, but that is the truth. Is it from our government, the way we are begging, the way we expect them, or when we know the way we what we see as luxury, by our environment, these things that are trauma. Because when you now go to another environment or you communicate to other people and you say that this is their standard of living, you're like, these people are rich. Or sometimes the things we call wealthy, comfort, or luxury, they are just basic things. This is what your environment can do to you. It can rewire you. That is why you really need to come out of it and tell yourself, this is not who I am. This is not the ultimate, because I see people, sometimes the dream we have when we're growing up is because of the conditioning our mind has experienced as a result of our environment. What you've seen, people are, what people have been doing, you're like, oh, so this is the greatest heights. And you're not seeing people aiming for bigger things. You see them as being conventional, so you are seeing them as doing so much, or you're seeing them and they now want to become God. No. So I need us, to ask yourself this question as you bring this episode to a wrap. The scenes you're experiencing right now, what do you think, you know, what trauma do you think you're experiencing right now? What painful experience have you had? Or what are the things that you did not have but you wish you had? And it's now making you live in a survival mode. You really need to know them, because until you know them and be intentional. For example, now probably you're someone that, you know you saw everyone around you, the marriage did not work. Now you're in a marriageable age, you are now not still having a meaningful relationship. You need to now, because when you know what your problem is, it helps you to now look for solutions. Now you know the problem. Oh, okay, the solution, one of the things, okay, now you need to start feeding your eyes with good things, see people, listen to people that their marriage is working, learn things about marriage. But if you don't know what the issue is, you just think, oh, all men are this, men are not serious, people are not ready to get married. That is not the issue. Sometimes we, most of the time, judge the other people or judge every other person aside ourselves. And I'm not saying you should judge yourself, I'm just saying that you should critically examine the matter, critically examine your life, take stock of the things happening, and ask yourself sincere questions. And like this podcast, uncomfortable but necessary. Have a necessary conversation with yourself, even though it might be uncomfortable. And if you cannot do this by yourself, you can talk to a therapist, talk to a counselor, talk to a coach or a mentor. And I have the mentorship platform Clarion. You can check it on Instagram, Clarion Limited. I often coach people, mentor and counsel. So you can want to talk to someone that will help you to walk through this traumatic experience, in a healthy way that can bring about a healing that is needed for the person that you want to become, for the person that you see. Because most of the time, people, the gap between who you are right now and the person you want to become, or the person you're seeing, or the person you're dreaming of yourself, is your healing through traumas. And if that gap is not filled, it's just always continue to be, I hope to, I wish, I want to, I hope to, I pray for. And I pray that the grace to do the needful, to look inward. Yes, your trauma is probably not your fault, but your healing, your progress, your coming out of it is in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this beautiful episode. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And do not forget to like if this has in any way added value to you. Share with everyone in your space, your friends, your family, your loved ones. Share this video with them. And subscribe if you're yet to. Turn on the notification bell. then anytime I go live or an episode is being dropped, you will be informed and notified. And do not forget to like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Share, your an experience you've had. Probably you have a question. Feel free to share them in the comments, and I'll try my best to, give answers to them all. Thank you, and to have a blessed one. Bye.